Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan Janowicz, and I am the board member of Green Red Institute. On behalf of Green Red Institute, a vegan think tank from Poland, operator and initiator for the largest advocacy coalition, Future Food for Climate, which today connects 90 organizations, civil society organizations. I'm honored to welcome you to our meeting as part of the European Vegan Summit 2023. The European Vegan Summit brings together experts from around the world, game changers for animal rights, climate, human rights, and a just, inclusive, ethical transition of the food system. The event is under the patronage of the European Parliament. In the past week, with hope, we listened to President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during the State of the Union, during the speech during the State of the Union. However, there was no mention of the farmed animals. There was no commitment to fulfill promises for a just transition to a sustainable food system. We did not hear about legislation for farmed animals. This is the time when decision makers demonstrate their intention and the direction of their policies. In Poland, we hear about the restoration and rebuilding of pig farming, and the European Union about food security, but not about a just, ethical food system transition. Let's have an honest conversation about the political future of the animals we eat and what our movement should do now. Thank you very much. A warm welcome to your presence today. And let me start from introducing our speakers for today's session. Professor Andrzej Elz, who is a zoologist, bioethicist, author for over 100 scientific works, chair of the Polish Ethical Society, associated with the Faculty of Artes Liberales of Warsaw University, member of the first local ethical committee on animal experiments, term 2020-2023. We've got with us also Ph.D. Olga Kikou, who's a head of Compassion and World Farming EU, an international organization dedicated to improving farm animal welfare, ending industrial animal agriculture, and achieving sustainable food and farming. Olga, thank you so much for being with us today. We've got also with us Catalina Lo Salazar, director of the Aquatic Animal Alliance, the coalition of over 130 organizations in 67 countries that are spearheading the work around the globe to reduce the suffering of aquatic animals in the food system. Catalina, thank you so much for being with us today. We've got also Matteo Cupi, who is a vice president for Europe at Animal Equality International. He founded Animal Equality Italy in 2012 and helped the organization become a power player for animal protection in Italy and throughout Europe. Thank you so much for being with us today. And last, but of course not least, Olivier Morice, Public Affairs Officer at L214, campaigner and animal rights activist. 2014, using filmed investigations and background information, raises ethical questions based on reasoned arguments and proposes solutions to be implemented at a policy and individual level. So I would like to warm welcome to you, Olivier. Thank you so much for being with us. And I would like to start our debate, and I would like to direct my first question to Olga Kikou. Olga, famous animal welfare legislation review. Will there be a real change for animals? Can you give us an insight into the hopes and also fears of the legislative review being done after more than 40 years? Olga, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for this great summit. It's always a pleasure to be here and always a pleasure to be with colleagues who are fighting for animals, among other causes, of course. Well, the animal welfare revision, yes, you're right, Morgan, 40 years, a long time. when the plans for the revision of the animal welfare legislation were announced in the Farm to Fork strategy back in May 2020, we were overjoyed because the Commission decided to proceed with such a strategy. And of course, we were later, over a year later, we were even more overjoyed because the Commission committed to phase out the use of cages following the end the cage age ECI back in June of 21. The Commission in this revision process, the Commission has spent years working on this revision, assessing the feasibility of the current legislation, identifying gaps, talking to many stakeholders. The other day, I learned that there were over 300 dialogues with stakeholders during these past years, and decided to present 4 proposals on kept animals, transport, slaughter, and labeling. And these are supposed to be presented as of the updated work program by Q3 of 23, which is ending in just a few days from now, the end of September. However, in the meantime, following the Ukraine war, which is a horrible event, ongoing event, but it's being used as an excuse to basically keep the status quo, where the status quo is determined to be important. We see a very strong push against legislative change, which would actually affect EU agriculture, which actually, and this actually ignores the drastic impact of unsustainable practices have on nature, on people, and on animals. So the argument of ensuring food security and thus increasing food production has been used over and over again. And despite this, we hear this all the time, and we are not convinced, because actually we produce more than enough food to feed the planet. We see, especially we have seen in the last few months, a decreased appetite for any meaningful change. Over in July, we had the animal welfare proposals passing through the hurdle of the so-called Regulatory Scrutiny Board of the European Commission. This is a body that evaluates impact assessments and has a right to veto proposals. There was a negative opinion in May, but then a positive opinion in July. However, despite this positive opinion, the future of the proposals, of the publication of the proposals, remains uncertain. We had the State of the Union address by Commission President Ursula von der Leyen last Wednesday. And there we saw that she glaringly omitted any mention of the animal welfare proposals, both in her speech, but also in the letter of intent, which basically presents the priorities of the Commission. We have this development amidst news circulating in the media that the Commission has decided to drop the proposals altogether. Therefore, we have fears about what all this means and all this uncertainty. The president actually embraced specific calls and asks by the farming lobby for strategic dialogue, as if what we did till now was not strategic enough, and we have to have more strategic dialogue, and also for less polarization. It's really hard to believe what is happening, because we have been very active and have engaged in this dialogue for the past few years. We are afraid that we are concerned that this actually may be used as an excuse to drag out the whole process, to delay the presentation, the publication of the proposals. So there is quite a lot of confusion and different scenarios circulating. Of course, we hope that the proposals will be published without delays, and we hope for a revamp of the animal welfare rules. We have strongly advocated for many asks during this process for phase out of cages and an end to mutilations and an end to chick culling and lower stocking densities, and also for transport and slaughter and ending of cruel practices. But we're uncertain about the proposals now, and we are uncertain about not just the timing but also the level of ambition, because this is also important. We don't want to have, of course, meaningless proposals. So we need to get through the first step, which is to have the publication of the proposals first, and then go to the legislators and then try to do our best to improve these proposals and to drive ambition higher. So as of now, what we can do is to first fight for these to be published, and then later on continue to push for stronger rules with all the institutions in Brussels, but also to also have the support in the member states.
Okay, thank you so much for your voice. Next question I would like to ask is I would like to direct to Catalina. How do you assess the European Commission's 2019-2024 actions in the context of fishes and other aquatic animals? I particularly want to touch on octopuses and legislation for the welfare of fishes. Catalina, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Morgan, and everyone for participating today. I'm going to start talking a little about farmed fish. So the Commission recently acknowledged that there is a lack of policy and regulations for farm fish in the EU, and therefore they identified the need for more legislation. And as a result, they asked EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, for their scientific opinions on farm fish welfare. And as a result, EFSA published a timeline to release the results of their research, which will include species like carp, salmon, trout, sea bass, sea bream, European eel, and farmed tuna. However, the timeline to release the results of this research span from 2025 to 2030. So we are, of course, unsure what the results of this opinion from EFSA will be, but it does open the door for significant welfare improvement for these species that are exploited in farms, which currently have no protections, contrary to land farmed animals in the EU, which have some protections. However, it is important to highlight that regardless of the results of EFSA, the Commission is not bound to uphold these recommendations. And I think that's where advocacy groups need to work to ensure that if the EFSA recommendations are aligned with our welfare asks as a movement, then we should work to influence the parliamentarians to vote for the Commission to adopt the legislation suggested by EFSA. However, we do need to be aware that this is a long timeline. As I mentioned, it is at least 7 years for the research to be completed. So we kind of need to space out our actions to ensure that, this issue isn't forgotten during that time. And for the Aquatic Animal Alliance, our welfare priorities remain within the framework of our 5 key welfare pillars for aquatic animals, which include water quality, stocking density and space requirements, feed composition, stunning and slaughter, and environmental enrichment. And we will continue to make sure that these are taken into consideration by the relevant stakeholders during this process. And so far, what we know is that, or what we've heard really, is that the draft legislation may include mandatory stunning for aquaculture. But of course, there are some questions around that legislation now after the president's speech last week, as Olga mentioned. So, we'll keep waiting on what happens with the legislation. And in terms of wild capture fisheries, welfare really does not exist at all. Even the conversation on welfare does not exist. And it has never been included in public consultations related to fisheries. However, what we hope is that if legislations for farm fish are applied, for example, the mandatory stunning in the legislation, then it can open the door to the discussion of why those same species would deserve the consideration of mandatory stunning in farms, but not if they are caught in the wild. So that could open the doors for further engagement in this kind of part of important welfare for fish. And then finally, for octopus, as you mentioned, so of course, our biggest concern is the octopus farm that is being planned in the Canary Islands in Spain. And unfortunately, we do not expect much from the Commission at this point in this topic. So Nueva Pesca Nova, which is the company that is planning to establish the farm, has kind of sold the project to the European Union under the Blue Economy Directive, under the pretense that octopus farming will increase food security and autonomy, and will also reduce the pressure on wild octopus fisheries. And, aside from the many ethical and welfare concerns of farming this species, which is highly intelligent and sentient, what would happen with this industry is that it will actually have the opposite effects of what the industry is claiming, especially since octopus are carnivorous animals. So, of course, they would require putting further pressure on overfished populations to feed these animals in the farm. And they're usually fed other species that could be consumed by humans. So it's very unsustainable to kind of include this animal in the food supply chain further. And for example, in other cases of aquaculture exploitation around the world for other species, where we have a lot of, information because it has been done for many decades now, for example, for salmon and trout, which are also carnivorous animals, there is ample evidence that the pressure on wild populations for these same species is not decreased, but actually increased. And this is because the demand for the product grows because it is more available in more places when it is farmed. Secondly, the price of the product drops because of the increased supply, meaning that the fishing industry must catch more wild animals to make the same profit. So farmed octopus would compete with wild octopus catching, but it would have the opposite effect of what the industry is claiming. Therefore, the Blue Economy Directive that the octopus farm is kind of trying to be under should really be evaluated more carefully by the European Union in general. And another kind of aspect that they claim that they're solving with the octopus farming is that, they're going to ensure food security. But really, octopus is a premium product. It is not part of basic nutrition for European countries, which makes the argument of food security quite exaggerated. And the other issue is that there is no humane stunning and slaughter method for octopus that is available right now, scientifically proven. And, from investigations from organizations like Compassion in World Farming, it has shown that this company plans to use a method called ice slurry, which means that they just put the animals in ice until they suffocate. And, this slaughter method is not recommended by the World Organization for Animal Health and FAO because it is very very cruel and causes low suffocation of animals in general. So, there are many problems surrounding these farms, and we hope that by raising this issue as a movement, we create enough momentum for the farm not to happen in Spain or anywhere else. So we will continue to campaign against this industry, and we hope more voices join within the parliament to help us raise all these very concerning aspects of the proposed farm.
Thank you so much for your voice. And now I would like to move on to Matteo Cupi. Matteo, animal equality is doing a lot at the EU level. What 4 demands do you have for the new European Commission? Please, the floor is yours.
Everyone, first of all, thank you for organizing. Yes, we're campaigning to stop the breeding of fast-growing chickens, which is a major issue not only in Europe but worldwide. In May of this year, our organization exposed the plight of these animals during a debate at the European Parliament's Petitions Committee. And after our intervention, the Commission decided to keep our petition open, thus by leaving room for the possibility of a European ban of fast-growing chickens. The EU Commission admitted that raising fast-growing chickens is problematic, and they also promised to evaluate the practice during this review of the animal welfare legislation, which is scheduled this year, as you said. All of this was also in response of our complaint. We presented 27 complaints against all of the EU member states, in which we reported that the breeding of fast-growing chickens, it is in conflict with European animal welfare laws. I want also to stress that it's since 2010 that the European Food Safety Authority has produced documents noting that this kind of farming is really negative for these animals. Another area where we are focusing not only in Europe but worldwide, it's the ban of slaughter of male chicks. As you may know, several countries within the European Union have already banned this practice. And in addition to France and Germany, there's also Italy, the country where I live. And in fact, last summer, our parliament banned the routine slaughter of chicks. This was voted by a large majority of the parliament, following a really intense campaign, I would say. But now we are campaigning to review the decree, because there are still too many exemptions, and this is a huge risk for this measure. So we're working, especially this week. Well, actually, it's from the first week of September that we start working to review the decree, because it's not enough. But yeah, we're going forward little by little. Another main focus is to ban cages. And as you know, this is a huge campaign also promoted by Compassion in World Farming with the End the Cage Age initiative, which our organizations strongly supported. And this initiative won, I would say, an overwhelming support from the Parliament in Europe. We hope that by the end of this year, the revision of animal welfare legislation will be published as promised. And another issue is, despite the silence of the European Commission regarding this matter, we are very, I can say, worried by the silence of the European Commission, and we will not stop doing our part to ban cages. Another topic where I would like to mention is, since 2012, we've been fighting to stop foie gras, which is a cruel product that is obtained through the practice of force feeding. This product is considered traditional, but force feeding it is not, to the point which is a crime in the most of European countries. So force feeding also is a practice that should be banned worldwide. We're requesting the revision of the EU regulation on marketing standards for poultry meat, and also the elimination of the minimum liver weight, which is a requirement in the production of this product for both duck and goose livers. What can I add? To date, force feeding is still allowed for foie gras production in 5 European countries. And also throughout our investigations, we've also exposed the entire Spanish foie gras industry and closing down a farm as well. And also exposed in a couple of occasions the French foie gras industry.
Well, thank you so much for your voice. And next question will be directed to Olivier. Olivier, you have been active for a long time at the EU level. What main failures versus successes would you point out in the 2019-2024 animal action? Please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for this invitation to this great meeting. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm afraid I will say a few things that Olga already developed, but I would start by asking, how do you define success and failure? And I'll start with ECIs. ECIs, for example, are great successes because our organization together have led very successful ECI campaigns. We led them collectively, such as the end of the cage age, obviously, and even more successful, Leave Fur Behind, which collected an astounding 1.7 million signatures across Europe. And just to put contrast to this last number, in the meantime, the fur lobby launched its own ACI in order to fight back the Leave Fur Behind. And after 10 months, this ECI is stuck at 19,000 signatures. So it's a very poor performance. So I believe it is fair to say that we've had great successes towards the public opinion collectively. We've been successful in convincing the citizens throughout the EU that protecting the animals is important and that they must raise their voices for the animals. And we had the same situation, for example, with when the European Commission launched its online consultation regarding the revision of animal welfare legislation. Close to 60,000 citizens participated in the consultation, which is quite outstanding, especially if, considering the form that we have to fill in. So this is a very high number. But at the end of the day, when it comes to transforming these successes into law, we have to acknowledge that the fight is far from being won. A few examples again. A few years ago, the Commission launched a revision of its promotion policy program, which provided meat and dairy industries millions of euros over the past years, and animal rights organizations fought hard against it. And we must say we kind of lost because the revision is blocked and will likely not happen, even if this program is at odds with very important texts such as the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan. Also, there is a situation of the revision of the animal welfare legislation mentioned by Olga and all of you before me. We hear rumors that despite the President of the European Commission's commitment to revise the animal welfare legislation, we may not have any proposal by the Commission at all. And when we hear the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during her State of the Union speech calling for, quote, strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture, we must not be naive here. This is not a door left open for the animals. This is a tactic to delay. And we've had this conversation, this dialogue already with scientists, with politicians, with member states, with stakeholders, with us, animals advocates, the citizens, etc., during so many lengthy consultations. So it is very clear today that the European Commission does not listen to the citizens, but to the meat and dairy lobbies. And even if it's too early to call it a failure, we are far from a win for animals here. And so we must change that and make the EU institution understand that we can generate a lot of public pressure toward them. MEPs, must understand that they will be held accountable for their votes at the European Parliament and that they will pay the price for their support for the meat and dairy lobbies in the ballots. For example, a majority of MEPs voted against an amendment asking for an EU-wide ban on chicks and duckling killing during the vote on the infamous De Serre report. MEPs must understand that in the future, votes like this one will be met with a huge uproar by citizens. Also, we must realize that the citizens' opinions are not forever secured. The meat and dairy lobby are waging a cultural war to make sure that nothing changes. This is a point that Olga developed. We've had the examples in plain sight when Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine. Immediately, the intensive farming sector spread unsubstantiated, sorry, this was a challenge to pronounce, fears of Europe's food security being at risk, that were amplified by numerous voices, mainly from the right, in order to derail, to block, or to get rid of any protection for the animals or the environment. So to conclude, to keep fighting now with the next EU election in sight is of utmost importance.
Olivier, thank you so much for your voice. The next question I would like to direct to Olga. Olga, what are your predictions for the progressiveness of the next term of the European Parliament and taking animals off our plates?
Yes, well, in the past month, following the COVID crisis and this, the Ukraine war and the cost of living crisis, we see the rise of far-right parties across the EU, and there is a rise of anti-EU trends and anti-EU voices. We expect that this will very likely impact the European Parliament elections. And we expect that we will have more far-right and populist politicians who may gain power. We have already seen such a shift in country elections across the EU. And in addition to this, we see that the Parliament's strongest party, which is the European People's Party, EPP, has established itself as a farmers' party. And this was confirmed during the State of the Union speech of Commission President von der Leyen last Wednesday, when the chair, the EPP chair, Manfred Weber, actually used these words and confirmed what the change of direction that we had all seen in previous months. So, of course, this is not the best for the proposals, the best outcome for the environment and for the animal welfare proposals, for a sustainable food system that everybody has been talking about, because we have anti-EU politicians and far-right politicians, and even with the trend currently witnessed within EPP and even the Renew Party, these people oppose EU regulation as a whole for animal welfare, and they are more pro-farming politicians. Using the argument of, raising costs for farmers. I mean, we hear this all the time. And, with this message, they oppose any meaningful measures, of course, overlooking the mammoth there, that is the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, which has plenty of funds to support these transitions. So when it comes to support for plant-based diets in particular, the situation is not the best due to this great power that the agri lobby has in Brussels, but also in member states. The need to shift to more plant-based diets and decrease the consumption of animal product of animal products actually remains an elephant in the room. Despite this uplifting ambition that we had with the Farm to Fork strategy a few years ago, and mention a lot of references to eating less meat and more plant-based diets, there has been little done since then to put this into practice and incentivize the production and the consumption of plant-based foods. So we see references to reduction in the production consumption of animal products in many files, and that are up for votes in the European Parliament, for example, to be attacked and voted down in the Parliament. So we need supportive MEPs to make sure we have a strong voice in the next Parliament, in the next term, to push for this shift towards plant-based diets. So in general, our predictions are, I would say, are rather bleak, but we have to remain hopeful and we have to get to work. So we need to motivate as many people as possible to vote. The elections will play a big role. People need to vote for politicians who will support policies that will bring about real change, than those politicians who use populist slogans to gain cheap votes and do nothing. So we are developing tools to enable voters to make more informed choices and ensure that their votes for some people are not wasted. It is really now or never for us to start working towards the next elections. It is absolutely crucial for all of us to make sure that our voices will be heard next June. It is a rather dim, we live in difficult times, and it is a dim prospect, let's say, for the future. We need to just do as much as possible, and we need to work together, all of us, to make sure that what happens from now on, that we have a greater say in what happens. And we actually, as Olivier said earlier, that we hold politicians accountable to how they vote. And we want to make sure that they do understand that we will be watching them, and we will be going out there and speaking loudly, making sure that our voices are heard if they don't behave according to the pledges and the commitments they've made before the elections.
Okay, thank you so much for your voice. Professor Anowski, I have a question to you, please. Professor, if you could propose up to 3 legislative changes concerning farmed animals that you could immediately introduce across the European Union, what would they be? Please, the floor is yours.
So, hello everyone, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great surprise, for this afternoon, because I gave up my hope that I will be heard this afternoon because of my probably illiteracy, computer illiteracy, well, here I am. Okay, so I was initially asked to choose one legislative change. Morgan asked me just to choose one legislative change that I would make if I were an emperor, or I would make tomorrow to alleviate the ongoing suffering of farm animals. Instead, I propose a triad. And you will see why. Now, farmed animals are obviously farmed for sale of animal products. So the most encompassing, the most inclusive law, I would say, would be to subject all animal production to public control by means of welfare labeling. I think that is the most important thing, logically at least, is welfare labeling. This is obviously not an immediate cure which will make all animal production humane, immediate from overnight, but it could eliminate the worst practices and in this way gradually raise the level of minimum acceptability. Welfare labeling would make less profitable and thus help to terminate such cruelties as gestation farrowing crates for sows, tie stall housing for cows, which is in Poland, unfortunately, over 60% of milk cows are tie stalled, are staying in tie stalls, and also Jewish slaughter, which is a big problem in Poland, in the UK, and all over Europe. What's equally important, by forcing the consumers and thus by forcing the consumers to make choices, it would confront the general public, the consumers or the general public, with the acute suffering of animals they eat, and by this way make them feel more responsible for it. This would be like an engagement of the public in the process of improving farming. I hope it would launch a feed-forward mechanism between ever higher standards of husbandry and ever higher vigilance of the public. The public would start feeling to be this kind of controlling agent. So this is why I believe the primary, at least logically, is welfare labeling of animal products. However, an obligatory welfare labeling will be ineffective for slaughter unless a radical reform of slaughter, especially the permanent video surveillance, is instituted, because the so-called meatpacking industry does cheat now on a large scale, and will cheat the public unless prevented from doing that by effective laws. Almost needless to say, video surveillance will be useless without a set of appropriate regulation of its use. Actually, we prepared such a proposal in Poland, but the hopes are not very meek for the near future. And the third point, the reason this is the second legislation that I would see necessary in order to make this welfare labeling effective. And the third point is that with the obligatory welfare labeling, it will become even more profitable to ship live animals out of the European Union. Of course, if we have welfare labeling, that obviously it will pay off to send them out of the European Union. Otherwise, our welfare labeling would result in more cows, bulls, and other animals being sent for torment outside the EU. So now you see what my triad is. They basically welfare labeling, but in order to make welfare labeling effective, I see two more pieces of legislation necessary, which means the supervision of surveillance of slaughter, and making the 8-hour limit for transport. This is the third point, to make 8-hour limit for transport as a necessary member of this triad for immediate introduction. Otherwise, our welfare labeling would result in more cows, bulls, and being sent for torment elsewhere. So I hope I explained why I believe that at least three major pieces of legislation would be absolutely necessary to make a substantial major change. I think that I exhausted my 5 minutes, and thank you for listening.
Professor, thank you very much for your voice. Next question I would like to ask Catalina, please. Catalina, aquatic animals are still widely overlooked in the public debate on farmed animals. Despite this, could you share any success stories that show that change for aquatic animals is possible? Please, the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, I really like this question because, even though, like you say, there's still a lot to do and aquatic animals are not a priority, mostly in conversations related to animal welfare, sustainability. Fortunately, the momentum is growing for aquatic animals, and we have seen some very exciting advances in the past few years. So, for instance, in 2021, the FAO included animal welfare language for the first time in their aquaculture directive, which is called the Shanghai Declaration. And it is FAO's roadmap for policy priorities of the aquaculture sector to meet the sustainable development goals of the sector globally. And we sent them language to include in this document related to aquatic animal welfare specifically, and it was accepted. And this document now is used as a directive by governments and policymakers around the world, which really opens the door for aquatic animal welfare to be included in strategies for policy change around the world and in aquatic animal welfare and sustainability. Another very encouraging progress came last year with the inclusion of cephalopods like octopus and decapods like shrimp in the animal sentience legislation in the UK. And after a comprehensive study carried out by the London School of Economics, this report recommended that all cephalopod mollusks and decapod crustaceans be regarded as sentient animals for the purposes of the UK animal welfare law, which means that they must include it in the scope of any future legislation relating to animal sentience in the UK. And this review also made recommendations on specific commercial practices that are cruel to these animals. And so these opens the door for legislation that could ban practices like boiling lobsters alive, selling live animals, and octopus farming as well, because the research clearly states that achieving high welfare conditions in octopus farms is impossible. We are also seeing the industry moving away from cruel practices like eye stalk ablation, for example, which involves the mutilation of the eye of female shrimp to induce reproductive behaviors. And this practice has been shown to be very detrimental for the animals and even cause more issues in farms, which is why it makes no sense to continue doing it. And our recently released aquaculture animal welfare certification benchmark shows that most top certification standards in aquaculture have either banned or are phasing out eye stalk ablation in the farms that they certify. And this includes really big players like ASC, Global Gap, RSPCA, Friend of the Sea, and Natureland. We're also seeing that some of the industry is also now rejecting octopus farming, and certifiers like RSPCA and Friend of the Sea have preemptively stated that they would not certify octopus farms, as it really is impossible to achieve high welfare standards in intensive farming of this species. And this helps us send a message to the industry that this practice really won't be profitable because the industry itself is against certifying these practices. And other successes around the world have included banning practices where aquaculture farms or fishing are harming local communities and ecosystems. So an example of this was the ban of open net salmon farming in Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, after local communities chose to reject a project of a salmon farm after seeing the egregious effects of salmon farming in its neighbor Chile. So they decided they did not want that type of industry in their ecosystem. And in Canada, similarly, open net salmon farming is being phased out in the Discovery Islands in British Columbia. And its effects after just a year of starting this process of phasing out the farms has already shown to be very positive, because wild Pacific salmon numbers are forecasted to increase substantially this year. And it is thought that this is at least partially a consequence of the closure of the farms. So hopefully this trend and this phenomena will be studied more deeply, and there will be more evidence to show that, these farms are causing severe damage to the ecosystem. And this would create a precedent in favor of closing open net farms that are not meeting welfare and sustainability standards around the world. And another interesting advance regarding aquatic animal welfare was the ban on recreational fishing in Colombia. And kind of one of the reasons given to banning this practice is that it ignores basic animal welfare practices, such as stunning before slaughter, because as you know, in recreational fishing, most of the time the fish just are left to suffocate. So it is very encouraging that we're seeing different advances around the world and from different fronts where communities, policymakers, and the industry are all engaged.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catalina. My next question is for Matteo. Matteo, you have been involved in activism for years, working in NGOs on the national but also international level. When are systemic changes going to happen that will finally start treating animals not as commodities, but as sentient beings? And why are they so slow?
Well, this is a simple and complex question to answer. Get my meaning now. Here at the Vegan Summit, we already know the answer. A political act that everyone can do every day. It's with their fork, by choosing not to fund the industry that exploits and kills animals, by turning to, by adopting an 100% plant-based diet. And when we're saying they're so slow, it's because our society has always been based on animal exploitation from the very beginning. And especially after the Second World War, it has been created a new economy with intense farming. So we're still living within an old system. What I would say, it's an old system facing new problems, which involves billions and billions of earthling animals plus aquatic ones. And factory farming, as you know, is profit. And changing this reality means new and huge investments, trainings, and reform in our system. So it's about profit all the time. For this reason, it's low. More and more companies already started to explore the plant-based sector, investing in new systems where animals are out from the equation. So I am confident about the future, but as you said, everything is slow. I'm repeating this word because this is the key word, slowness. Everything is super slow, but still it's happening. Something is happening. Societal change is a very slow process. It's hard to appreciate while we are living it. I'm trying to do an example right now. If you compare the noise that the animal rights movement and the public opinion created on factory farming, just only factory farming, okay, on what was happening 15 years ago, let's compare nowadays against 15 years ago, we can see that a lot of work it's been done and we're making steps forwards little by little. So still slow, but we're not appreciating it because we're within, but something is happening. So we're growing every day as a movement and bigger than ever. Consider it. This is my answer. We can talk about it for hours and hours because it's like, first, it's based also on some speculations on facts and from a personal point of view, but still something is happening. Even if it's slow, I always do this example, compared the movement society 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, 40, 80 years ago. Everything is changing little by little.
Thank you so much for your reply. Now I will direct my next question to Olivier. Olivier, do we have a chance of getting animals off our plates?
Like Matteo said, it's hard, it's slow, but yeah, it will happen for so many reasons. We need bold policies to take meat, dairy, and fish off the menu. And yes, we have a chance of getting animals out of our plates. The goal of L214, the organization I work for, is to achieve a reduction of 50% of meat, dairy, and fish by 2030. But when it comes to changing this eating habits, governments usually chicken out. And any clear statement to reduce products of animal origin is or could be considered a taboo. Let's take the example of France. Our president in France, Emmanuel Macron, announced that next Monday he will introduce his quote plan for the environment with a very bold objective, a 55% cut of CO2 emissions by 2030 compared to 1990 threshold in all sectors. So it looks bold. And you would think that it would mean a drastic cut in animal farming sector plus a national public campaign to reduce meat and dairy intake. But well, now of course not. According to the Prime Minister Elizabeth Borne, no reduction target is set. So this is crazy, this is ridiculous, but it's because we are facing a taboo situation. Our food system generates roughly 1/4 of our CO2 emission, and there's no way we can avoid cutting on meat and dairy. Yet Macron and its government intends to carefully avoid this topic, even if cutting on meat and dairy and fish is the easiest and most effective way to reduce our carbon footprint. At EU level, the European Commission published its farm to fork strategy without any clear reduction objective. How is it possible when virtually all scientists call for this reduction? Still at EU level, the EU legislation that could have had an impact on our food system, the Sustainable Food System Framework, will likely have the same fate as the animal welfare legislation. Indeed, during her State of the Union speech, Ursula von der Leyen did not mention the Sustainable Food System Framework. Why is that? Why are the institutions so shy? Well, it is because our elected officials fear the power of the industry and also its violence. In France, again, example France, since the 60s, the leading intensive agriculture union organized hundreds of violent protests with a very heavy economic and human toll. Their leader in 1974 famously said that, quote, 2,000 farmers who destroy everything is more impactful than 10,000 protesters marching peacefully. And their violence and their industrial and political weight have led the successive governments
Olivier, I think
to bend down and to comply.
For a bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you're with us. Okay, please continue.
Oh, sorry. Maybe my computer just kind of played me tricks. Yeah, I was saying that also the elected officials, etc., fears the Netherlands situation because I guess you all know the story. In the Netherlands, you had an attempt to reduce methane emission by 30%, and it led to huge and violent protests by farmers. And it led also to the rise of a right-wing populist agrarian party, which totally disrupted the political balance of the country. So I know I sound quite pessimistic, but we can take on this fight and we must do so. To me, it means getting involved in long-term campaigns to have people talk about this need to take animals out of our plates, especially to target journalists, to target allied politicians, to target environmentalist activists, health professionals, any people with an audience. They all must say and they all must state loud and clear that animals must be taken off the menu now, and now it's time to spread the word out of our vegan-friendly community. Whenever there is a radio or TV broadcast or show about climate, about health, about sustainability, we must push to link the topic of reducing meat and dairy and fish to these related topics. And the scorching summers and the fact that we are now into a climate emergency are powerful drivers to push for drastic change and to finally talk about the need to take animals off our plates.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to the Q&A session, I'd like to ask the last question to the Professor Andrzej Elz. Professor, you have been an observer and active advocate for animals on the national and European political scene for years. Whether and what has changed in legislation for animals, and what hopes do you have for the next elections? Are we facing years of darkness for animals or years of revolution for animal rights?
Thank you. It's a challenging question. So in keeping your terms of light intensity, very physical terms of light intensity, I would say I hope for a slight gradual lightening in terms of getting lighter, not of this electric discharge, but I mean getting lighter, lightening of the present darkness, with occasional 2 steps forward followed by 1 step back. So this is essentially like every progress takes place. First of all, the idea of animal revolution, popular in the 80s in the Anglo-American world, basically, has always been naive, because there is, I can appreciate to some extent, because I am the one who marched with Tom Reagan in America in the 80s against University of Pennsylvania and shouting, what do you want animal rights? When do you want them now? And it looked like a big revolution. 40,000 of us marched against University of Pennsylvania. So, but that's gone. And I think it has always been naive, because there is no one to carry out such a revolution. Poor animals can do it, as you know. And animal defenders remain politically marginal to non-existent if you consider, well, basically the whole political landscape in the European Union, for example. Now comes the idea of pro-animal revolution as a sort of byproduct of the green revolution concerning environment, including climate. Which already, I am sorry to realize that already fades away, as we hear from Brussels after the light expose by Ursula von der Leyen. It looks like this this idea is getting weaker. But even if the green revolution ultimately succeeds, which I hope, it will eliminate or constrain only some sectors of animal production, especially those using the ruminants, but will probably leave on ice, so to speak, on ice, like billions of birds categorized as poultry as well as fishes. Now, in terms of politics, the European Union has an unprecedented potential, in my opinion, for improving the fate of billions of sentient animals, which leads me to remark on the ambivalence of its expansion of the European Union. For one thing, it's very good when the minimum standards are imposed on new member states, like they were imposed on Poland, for example, in 2004, and maybe they will be imposed on the Ukraine, etc. So there is no question there is a big progress in that respect. I can tell it from my own experience as far as experimental animals are concerned. However, for another thing, the new members from Eastern Europe, including Poland, unfortunately, join a few old countries, such as Spain and France in particular, for diluting and weakening up all green and pro-animal agendas, and slow down the dispelling of the present darkness, to use that analogy. So we have to consider that even though European Union has this big potential and should expand, but this expansion will always slow down the reform and prevent revolution. No? if you realize what was the stand of those various countries of Eastern Europe, as well as France and Spain, for example, on chicken, on the reform of poultry. In the reform of legislation concerning laying hen and broilers, you can realize it very easily. So this is one of the reasons why I believe that the progress will be slow, and we cannot dream of a real revolution. Finally, I come back to the thought that there is no one.
I think we've got some problems with the connection from the Professor Anowski. Professor, yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's perfect. Thank you. Please continue.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, but I'm close to the end. I come back to the thought that there is no one really to carry out this animal revolution, because from my perspective of many decades, the animal rights movement is far too weak to effectively confront these paramount issues ahead, which we have ahead, because it is extremely fragmented and first of all lacking a doctrinal strength. We don't have any kind of doctrinal platform of the sort of of the sort of human rights that would carry our revolution. And in the absence of pro-animal think tanks, this is what's really lacking in our movement. Every serious social movement should have its think tanks that develop ideas and strategies. I don't see that in our movement. In the absence of think tanks, I hope that the present wave of human or animal studies that are very well thriving in Poland, for example, will remedy this shortage and make animal defenders better, more outspoken than they are now. They have more influence on politicians and public opinion. Anyway, it's an optimistic accent to a rather realistic or pessimistic view of a rather slow progress, a pessimistic view which is even strengthened if you look at a global perspective at the development of China and the significance of Russia, etc. The whole political situation beyond European Union does not really give much hope for a quick progress in the matters of animal welfare of farm animals. So much thought I have today to share. Thank you.
Professor, thank you so much. And with this, we are starting Q&A session. We already have some questions coming in. The first question I would direct to Matteo, and then the second one to Olga. Starting with you, Matteo. Italy. We can see more and more investigations. Do you think that they can actually change minds of politicians or only citizens? Or maybe we live in a so violent reality around us that nothing can actually change us. And I'm also wondering about you, Olivier, because I know that you're also in the topic of investigations. So that would be interesting to hear from Italy perspective, from Italy, but also from France.
Yeah, we saw what I can say regarding investigations in Italy, that more and more organizations within the last 10 years are using investigations as a leverage for corporate reasons to change animal welfare policies, but also what I can say, they are useful. They are useful from a couple of key aspects. First, because we can use them as a leverage also for a political debate. For example, right now we're using also investigations as a key factor for public questions at the parliament, for example. So they're really useful, and also to instill and change public debate regarding this. You know, people are learning and learning more by repetition. So for example, some people can say, yeah, but you know, they are the same images, but we need to do that. It's really important. In this case, repetition is key, because we are demonstrating that they are not isolated cases, but you know, it's something that is happening every day. And by having also many organizations executing in this way, it's not only, you know, one entity that is doing this. There are like many organizations that are proving the same. And it can be everything regarding factory farming. And also investigations are a great leverage as well. They're a great tool to have people thinking about animal food production by having them and also switching to a plant-based diet. This was my case, for example. Watched investigations, and overnight I went vegan. So this is like a domino effect that we are creating. Did I answer this question? Because it was like a quite wide question. So
thank you so much. And I would like to ask Olivier maybe to present your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, L214 it's famous in France for its investigation. Over the past 15 years, I think we released more than 150 of them, something like that, and it's really the heart of our organization, and it's truly important to generate awareness, public awareness, of course, to engage politicians, to challenge businesses also about their practices, to challenge the authorities, because quite often, the authorities let the lobbies and the industries do whatever they want, and close their eyes if ever there is any infringement of the laws. And it's also very useful for us to litigate. So the only thing I can mention also is that another thing I want to mention also is that we can see some kind of accoutrements effect, like people get used to see the investigation, and after a while it's a bit difficult to get the amount of media attention that we've been able to generate in the first years. So yeah, we have also to be aware of that. Investigation is very important, but it's not the end of it. You have to consider a lot of other aspects when you advocate for animals.
Olivier, thank you so much. With this, I would like to move on to Olga. I have a question to you. What is next? You are the EU policy observer for years. Do we have any progress? Please, the floor is yours.
Progress we would have if we actually have the proposals in any shape or form, because as I said, I expect the level of ambition to actually go lower, but at least you have something, and if you have something, you can work with it. If you don't have anything, if you have nothing, it's difficult. You need to find other ways. So yes, hopefully if we have the proposals, I think it is a good start. Of course, we would need to work a lot with around the elections. And I think each and every organization should develop a strategy around the elections, especially that is, of course, catered to their needs and the countries where they operate. But it is important to let the public know that EU elections actually will determine the future of the animals in the EU, of farmed animals in the EU, and of course our production consumption patterns. I think something that should be pointed out here is that in general, people do not comprehend what a big role the EU has in farming policy and also in the production and consumption of agricultural products in general. The people pay more attention to national elections because they're more familiar with the politicians, because it's their own countries and they focus too much on their own countries. But we need to also make a shift here. We need to understand that the people that we elect in our countries will actually go to Brussels and will be voting on thousands of files over the 5-year period that they will be there. They will have an opportunity to have events, to increase awareness about animal suffering, to increase awareness about the move to plant-based diets, etc. So I think part of our job should be not just to focus on the policies and the proposals themselves, but also to make people aware of the importance of making the right choices when they actually go to the polling booth, to the voting booth, and they when they actually go to the polls, because their choices will actually make a big difference for animals.
Thank you so much. We have one question for Catalina and then a very interesting question for Professor Olżanowski. Catalina, there's a question. I quote, "I do have an issue with the number of fish we kill per year. We do count them as kilos. How many fish we kill every year in reality?"
Yeah, so that is correct. Like in the industry, they don't count fish as individuals. They count them in tons or kilograms. And that poses a challenge for us as a movement to be able to quantify our impact or the true nature of the issue of the problem. So there have been some, counts and calculations on the amount of animals in the food system, and in aquaculture, it is around from 70 to 180 billion fish and 400 to 500 billion shrimp, which are staggering numbers, and you just can't wrap your head around them because they're so big. And in terms of fishing, the numbers are in the trillions, and that is because not all fishing is reported. There's a lot of illegal fishing. So these are just really educated guesses, I would say. But the scale of the problem is enormous. And, that is why we need to take into consideration different strategies to reduce the number of animals in the food system related to aquatic animals specifically, by creating, plant-based alternatives to these type of products as well. I feel that plant-based alternatives have focused mainly on, kind of replacing or trying to imitate meat and other types of land animals. But in the seafood space, there are still not many options, especially in locations where seafood is a main source of protein, which is like coastal regions. So that's interesting for the movement to also explore, like, how do we reduce the number of animals? And as I mentioned briefly, a lot of animals that we chose to farm are carnivorous, and that only increases the issue because we have to feed them fish from the ocean. So aquaculture isn't really solving any issues in overfishing because we're still having to get animals from the ocean to feed salmon and trout and other species. In Europe, for example, sea bass and sea bream are very common to farm. So, that's why we can't separate aquaculture from fishing. And that's why our approach is always to walk towards solutions in both industries, because they go hand in hand. But yeah, the amount of animals is staggering.
Karina, thank you so much. Professor Olżanowski, are you with us? Because there's a question, very interesting question, that I would like to direct to you. That's great, perfect. Professor, it's about elections in Poland. Are there any hopes for farmed animals?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I had no chance to prepare this question. I had a chance to prepare the other question, but I didn't get the third question. But it's relatively simple, so I have to improvise. No, the chances are slim. The chances are slim because though the only party that is really serious and fairly concerned about the animal is the left wing, with the left wing party, which is called the New Left. And this one has no chance to get elected and has a very slim chance to get into government. In the very unlikely case that the New Left is the third force. We know that the conservative Peace Party will be probably the well, there are two main players, like the Peace, the Conservative Party, and the sort of center, which is the former European Council President Tusk. Is the Citizen Coalition. So there are two main parties. One is the extreme right, which is essentially against all animals and reform, and the other is the center Citizens Coalition Party with Donald Tusk as its head, and he's not particularly concerned about animals. This sort of neutral. So now it depends on which. If they had a chance to form the government, I mean this Donald Tusk, if they had a chance to form a new government, they would have to choose one of those smaller parties. Right now it depends which of them will get the maximum votes. As I said, the left wing is unlikely. Probably there will be another sort of center party of this guy who wrote this Christian guy who wrote a very nice book about divine animals. He wrote a nice book, but then forgot about the issues of about all animals and got together with peasants, with a rural party which is against any animal reform, any improvement of animal lives, strongly against. So I think the chances are really slim, because the left wing party will at least enter the parliament, certainly. So they will have their voice, but they will be always in the minority. So there is no really hope for any major change. Of course, we can hope for. The only hope is for some sort of not too expensive, I would say, structural changes. And I have in mind that such a change, for example, as far as the stray animals go, which kind of legislation that doesn't involve much money and does not affect those major interest that goes into billion of euros. But as far as farm animals are concerned, I think that the situation is really pretty bad. We cannot hope for any breakthrough. So much of my realistic comments on that issue. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your reply to the question from the audience. I think we still got time for one more question that I will put, and please, anyone who would like to take it, you're more than welcome to do so. What role do you think the Common Agricultural Policy plays in the advocacy for farmed animals? If anyone would like to take this question, Olga, please.
The worst role. The common agricultural policy over the years has actually contributed to more industrialization of animal farming, more intensive conditions, and has been helping farmers, keep with animal farming for as long as possible, and has contributed to great animal suffering, and also has led smaller farmers to go out of business because they cannot compete with the big farms, etc. So there are many other issues besides just the animals. We need actually to not just have a serious rethink about this policy. We need to turn around. We need to have a food policy. We need to make sure that production and consumption go together. We cannot be producing things that products that are not healthy for people, that lead to animal suffering, that are bad for the environment. We need to look at sustainability long term. So together with many other organizations in Brussels, especially groups that are really focusing on the CAP, on the Common Agriculture Policy, we are trying our best to make sure that this Common Agriculture Policy actually becomes a thing of the past, that it is transformed into something that is, into a policy that is sustainable, and that certainly moves away from animal suffering and causing all sorts of detriment to our environment, etc.
Okay, thank you so much. And with this reply, we are coming to the end of our panel today. I would like to thank all the speakers for their commitment and participation. Thank you also to all of you for your presence. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Morgan Janowicz, and I had the honor of moderating today's session on the behalf of Green Rev Institute. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.